Anna, this is not what I expected for dinner. Edward's voice cut through the silence of our dining room, sharp and disapproving. I looked up from the modest meal I had prepared, feeling a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. But it's your favorite, spaghetti carbonara, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Edward pushed his plate away, his face twisted in disdain. I expected something more elaborate, especially now that you're just working part-time. Honestly, Anna, what do you do all day? I felt a sting of hurt at his words. Since marrying Edward, my life had revolved around his needs and expectations. Reducing my successful career to a part-time job was a sacrifice I made for our marriage, a decision he had insisted on. Edward, I've been busy with the house, and I thought you liked this dish, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Well, clearly your part-time job is making you lose touch with how to please your husband. Maybe you need to rethink your priorities. The room grew heavy with his words, a painful reminder of the control he wielded over my life. It wasn't always like this. Once, Edward was the charming man who swept me off my feet, a seemingly perfect partner. But now, seated across from me, he was a different person, critical, demanding, and endlessly cold. I tried to push back the memories of better days. They felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by the reality of our strained, one-sided marriage. A marriage where my efforts were invisible, and my existence seemed to serve only his comfort and ego. As I cleared the table, Edward's phone pinged with a message. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. My heart skipped a beat as I read the preview of the message. Can't wait for tonight, Elle. A surge of emotions washed over me. Confusion, betrayal, anger. But I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to know more, to understand the extent of the deception I was living in. And so, with a heavy heart, I carried on with the evening, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me like a physical burden. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Edward's voice, sharp and demanding. Anna, where are my blue socks? The ones I specifically asked you to wash for today. I hurried to the bedroom, finding him rummaging through the drawer with growing impatience. I'm sorry, Edward. They must be in the laundry. I can find another pair for you. Another pair? You know I need those for my meeting today. It's like you don't think about my needs at all, he snapped, his voice laced with accusation. I felt a twinge of guilt, even though I knew his expectations were unreasonable. Ever since reducing my job hours, Edward's demands had only increased, as if my sole purpose was to cater to his every whim. Later that day, I decided to confront him about the text message. My heart pounded as I waited for him to return from work. When he finally walked through the door, I mustered all my courage. Edward, who is Elle? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He froze for a moment, then scoffed. Elle? Oh, you mean Lisa from accounting. Just work stuff, Anna. You're being paranoid. His dismissive tone stung, but I wasn't convinced. I had seen the way the message was worded, the intimacy it implied. But arguing with Edward was like talking to a wall. He had an answer for everything, a way to make me feel small and insignificant. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan began to form in my mind. Edward's behavior, his secrecy, it was all pointing to something more. I needed proof, something concrete to confront him with. I decided to investigate, to uncover the truth behind Edward's lies. The following days were a blur of half-hearted chores and secret investigations. I combed through our phone records, his receipts, anything that could give me a clue. And then I found it. A charge for a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town, a place we had never visited together. Armed with this evidence, I waited for the right moment to confront Edward. It came one evening as we sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Edward, why is there a charge for a hotel stay last week? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to anger. Why are you snooping around my things? That's an invasion of privacy, Anna. But why the hotel, Edward? I pressed on, feeling a surge of anger. It was a business meeting, Anna. You wouldn't understand, he replied, his voice cold and dismissive. I knew he was lying, but I also knew arguing would lead nowhere. I needed more than just suspicions and hotel charges. I needed undeniable proof of his infidelity, something that would shatter his facade of innocence. And I was determined to find it, no matter what it took. A few days later, I received the opportunity I was waiting for. Edward announced he would be working late, his tone nonchalant, as if it were just another evening. But I knew better. Tonight was my chance to uncover the truth. I waited until Edward left, the silence of the house settling around me like a heavy cloak. My heart was racing as I grabbed my coat and keys. I drove to the boutique hotel, the address etched into my memory. As I approached the hotel, my hands trembled with a mix of fear and determination. I walked into the lobby, feigning confidence. The receptionist looked up, her expression neutral. "I'm looking for Mr. Edward Thompson," I said, trying to sound casual. "He's expecting me." The receptionist typed something into her computer, then paused, looking up with a puzzled expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no reservation under that name tonight." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Edward was telling the truth. But then, as I turned to leave, I saw them. Edward, hand in hand with a younger woman, laughing as they exited the elevator. My heart sank, and a wave of nausea hit me. There was no denying it now. I confronted them, my voice shaking with anger. "Edward, what is this?" Edward's face went pale, his confident demeanor crumbling. "Anna, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, letting go of the woman's hand. "Don't lie to me, Edward. I've seen enough," I shouted, the hurt and betrayal boiling over. The woman, realizing the situation, quickly excused herself, leaving us in an awkward silence. Edward tried to explain, his words a jumble of excuses and lies. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had seen enough. The man I married, the man I trusted, was a cheater and a liar. I drove home in a daze, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The life I had built with Edward was a lie. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I was going to make him pay for the pain he caused me. This was just the beginning of his downfall. The following morning, Edward returned home, his demeanor a mix of guilt and defiance. I sat at the kitchen table, a storm of emotions brewing within me, waiting for him to speak. "Anna, about last night," Edward began, his voice hesitant. "Save it, Edward. I saw everything I needed to see," I interrupted, my voice icy. "How long has this been going on?" Edward avoided my gaze, fiddling with his wedding ring. "It's not like that, Anna. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" I laughed bitterly. "I catch you with another woman, and I'm overreacting?" Edward's face hardened. "You've been distant, Anna. I have needs, and you've been neglecting them." I was appalled at his audacity. "Neglecting you? I've been bending over backward to meet your ridiculous demands, and this is how you repay me?" The argument escalated quickly. Edward's tone became cruel and mocking. "You really thought you were enough for me? I married you because you were convenient, easy to control, but frankly, Anna, you're boring. This other woman, she's exciting, she's passionate, you could never compete with her." His words were like daggers, each one slicing through the last threads of my affection for him. I felt a fiery anger replacing the hurt. "You think you can just use me, discard me when you're done? You're going to regret underestimating me, Edward." Edward scoffed. "And what are you going to do? You're nothing without me. You've given up your career, your life, all for me. You're trapped, Anna." But I wasn't the same woman he had married. His betrayal had awakened a fierce determination within me. "Watch me, Edward. You've unleashed something you're not prepared to handle." From that moment, I knew what I had to do. Edward had humiliated and belittled me, but I wasn't going to be his victim any longer. I was going to expose him for the fraud he was, take back control of my life, and ensure he paid dearly for his deceit and cruelty. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I gathered evidence of his infidelity, consulted a lawyer, and began putting together a plan to dismantle the life of lies Edward had built. I was no longer the passive, accommodating wife he thought he had subdued. I was a woman scorned, fueled by betrayal, and I was going to make sure Edward Thompson regretted the day he underestimated me. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination as I faced Edward in our living room, a stack of photographs and documents in my hands. These were the weapons I had gathered to dismantle his facade of innocence. "Edward, did you think you could keep your affairs hidden forever?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He looked at me, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Anna, what are you talking about?" I threw the photographs on the table. They showed Edward with the other woman, intimate and unguarded. His face turned pale as he picked them up, his usual composure crumbling. This is a misunderstanding, he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. A misunderstanding? I laughed coldly. I think it's pretty clear what's going on here. You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and I have proof. Edward's expression shifted from shock to anger. You've been spying on me? Invading my privacy? Privacy? What about my dignity, Edward? What about the vows we made? I shot back, my anger boiling over. You've made a fool of me, but I'm not going to sit back and take it. I watched as Edward's arrogance deflated, replaced by a desperate attempt to regain control. Anna, listen, we can work this out. I made a mistake, but that's all it was, a mistake. But I was done listening to his lies. No, Edward, this is the end. I want a divorce, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done. Edward's eyes widened in panic. You wouldn't dare. Think about our reputation, our social standing. Our reputation? You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, I said firmly. I'm going to take everything from you, Edward. Your reputation, your comfort, your peace of mind. You're going to pay for what you've done. The realization dawned on him that I was serious, and a look of utter defeat washed over his face. I had him cornered, and there was no way out for him. As I walked away, leaving Edward staring at the incriminating evidence of his betrayal, I felt a sense of empowerment surge through me. This was just the beginning of my revenge. I was going to reclaim my life, and Edward was going to rue the day he decided to deceive me. The final confrontation with Edward was more than just a clash of words. It was the turning point where I took back control of my life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil, but I stood my ground, fueled by a sense of justice and retribution. One evening, as I sat in the now too quiet living room, Edward came in, looking defeated. The divorce papers were in his hands, a symbol of our shattered life together. Anna, please, let's think about this. We can start over, he pleaded, his voice lacking its usual command. I looked at him, the man I had once loved, now a stranger filled with desperation. Start over? After everything you've done? There's no going back, Edward. But I love you, Anna. I made a mistake, but I can change, he insisted, his eyes searching for any sign of the affection I once had for him. Love? Your actions showed anything but love, Edward. It's too late for apologies or promises. You've shown me who you really are, and I can't unsee that, I said firmly. As he realized that his pleas were futile, his demeanor changed, revealing the bitterness and resentment he had kept hidden. Fine, have it your way, but you'll regret this, Anna. You think you can survive without me? I felt a surge of confidence as I met his gaze. Survive? Edward, I will thrive. I don't need you to define my worth or dictate my happiness. I'm done being your puppet. With that, I signed the divorce papers, a symbolic act of liberation. Edward took them, his hands trembling slightly, and left without another word. In the weeks that followed, Edward's world unraveled. The truth about his affairs and deceit became public, tarnishing his once impeccable reputation. He lost the respect of his peers, and his career took a nosedive. The man who once held himself with such pride was now a shadow of his former self, broken by the consequences of his own actions. As for me, I emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined. I rebuilt my career, reconnecting with old colleagues and taking on new challenges. The experience had taught me the value of self-worth and the strength that lies in standing up for oneself. In the end, Edward got what he deserved, a life filled with regret and isolation. And I found freedom and a new beginning, free from the chains of a toxic marriage. I had risen from the ashes of our broken relationship, ready to face the world on my own terms.